Hey y'all! Well, I feel like I'm back in high school chemistry class with all this stuff, and just a warning, this is something I've never done before. But I ended up with a pair of these Big Dog Thermionic Labs output transformers for 300B, and obviously you can't just mount this. I guess you could, but it'd be really ugly to mount on top of an amplifier. And so I decided that I wanted to pot them in some cans, or at least put a can over the top of them. And what I originally thought I was going to do, and this is kind of what I was thinking, was to get a can like this that's a two-piece deal, and it has some screws that go into the side. It's got these little black screws there. You might not be able to see it very well, but they go into these holes, into these threaded holes into the side of this plate. And then what I was originally thinking about doing was, I didn't realize it came with this little turret thing on the bottom either, in a little circuit board. But what I was originally thinking about doing was just sandwiching this transformer through this plate to the chassis, with some bolts, and get this bolted down with that sandwiched, and then come back and put this over the top of it like that, and then put the screws in, and that makes it look pretty. But then you're thermally isolating the transformer from being able to cool. I've just created like a thermos. I mean, it's not a vacuum, but it's still, there's an air gap between the transformer and this cover. And while output transformers don't get super hot, man, it might if you cover them up like this. It's probably not a good idea. And so, again, I got these, and I got these off eBay, and these look like just an absolute direct copy of the covers that are on or the can that's used on a ISO Tango FC30 transformer. I'm not trying to pretend like these are something they're not. They sell some fake Tango little metal tabs you can put on the top of it, and to me that's fraud. Especially if I sold the amp as, oh yeah, it's got Tango iron and vintage Tango iron, and look how nice I'm not. And maybe they were doing that or making these for people that have maybe some vintage Tango transformers, and I don't know what they use to pot them, but if they use some sort of a tar material, you could heat the cans up and pull the cans off and replace dented up or beat up cans and put a new label on it, and that wouldn't be fraud. So I feel like this company is providing a service for the ability to restore transformers, or to have a really nice looking can to put some other kind of iron in. So what we're going to be doing in this video is, I bought some of this 2-part potting epoxy, and it says right on here, electronic grade epoxy resin designed for all electronic components and potting applications. And it's supposed to be heat transferable. You mix it 2-to-1. I'm reading off the label here because it didn't really come with instructions, and make sure it's mixed real good. Then let it stand for 5 minutes to allow the bubbles to rise to the surface. And it says to mix a minimum of 5 grams. We're going to be mixing up a whole lot more than that. This was 48 ounces. I guess this is a quart and a pint, and it's 2-to-1, so you get 48 ounces of potting liquid, which should be plenty to pot 2 of these transformers. And then I bought these little silicone bowls. You can see they're super flexy, and the reviews are right. These numbers are really hard to read on the side, so I'm probably going to come in with a Sharpie and mark I'm thinking about mixing up 12 ounces at a time of this stuff, and then so I'll mark the 8 and the 12, and then we'll put 8 of this, and then we'll come up to the 12 line with the hardener, And then it comes with these little sticks, which I think this is silicone on this too. And stir it up, like, you're in the kitchen, mix it up a cake mix, make sure it's mixed real good. And then, like I said, let it sit for, if there's some air bubbles in this, I'm not going to be freaked out. So I'm not going to worry like every little bubble coming up out of the epoxy, but get it stirred up really good. And it came with these little guys that you could, like, I guess, transfer it into that if you were doing something that was a little harder to pour. I don't think this is going to be that hard to pour. And what I may do is, this little bar is kind of in the way. So what I may do is get my cutoff wheel and like cut here and get this little bar out of the way. And then I can pour, then there's a nice gap there where I could come in and just pour it down each side and then let it go down the bottom. And I'm thinking about getting some sort of like a little rubber mat and putting it on, or making some little squares to put little standoffs. Maybe put it on this little metal, because I've got some sticky rubber kind of mat material that I could cut little squares out and put them in these corners so that this is not sitting like up against the top of this, and then it's got a little bit of a space for the epoxy to go up underneath here and fill in this. And let me know what you think in the comments about that idea. Do you think I should space this up from the top just a, maybe 1/16 of an inch or so, just to allow it so it's not just metal on metal up against that? Because I'm worried about that. I know the transformers, they do sing a little bit. You can hear them when I've got a dummy load on the amplifier. When I'm doing my frequency sweeps and power sweeps, you can hear it, and that's the transformer singing. And so I don't want metal on metal where it might buzz or something weird. That's kind of my thought on that. So anyway, I am going to go ahead and get started doing this. And so I guess if you do make a comment about that, it'll be in hindsight saying that was stupid. And it's like, well, it's too late. I've already got the epoxy in it. So I'm planning on cutting some little pieces and putting them on this metal so it's not touching. And yeah, I think this is going to end up looking really nice. And it's got 8 ohms out, and then this is the plate and the B plus for the tube. And then there's enough room. Let me go ahead and slide this in here so you can see what this looks like. And you can see it just fits. And then on this side, that's really flush. And so there's enough room to pull these wires up and then put this on. And that just fits. There's a little lip right here. I don't know if you can see it. Here's a close-up picture. And you can see there's just enough room there for this transformer to fit in here. And there's a little gap all the way around it. And so I don't think it's going to take a ton of this epoxy to fill up that gap. And this is honestly like the perfect size can for these transformers. I'm lucky that it worked out that way. So let's get to mixing this up and pouring. Like I said in another video, I think I'm going to try to do pour half of it at a time, but we'll see what 12 ounces does. That's like 6 ounces per can, and I want to have them both sitting there ready to go. And we'll see how much it fills up with 6 ounces. And because it makes sense to me to try to do a half a pour and then let that cure and shrink or expand or whatever it's going to do, and then do the second half in a separate pour after this cures. And I think they said 24 hours. Might let it sit 48 before I do the final pour. And then get the wires soldered up, put the can on, and this thing will be ready to install and look super pretty. And then I am going to go to the place where I get my little Skookie Design badges that I put on the front of my amps and get him to make some little gold Skookie with black trim little badges to put on the top of these and make it some extras. So you guys, when you're buying one of my amps and it comes with ISO iron on it that has this little insert, I could either maybe just send the ISO badge and the Skunky badges with the amp, and you can decide which one you want to put on there. I think they look cool with little skunks on there. But anyway, you want to announce that you've got ISO iron on your amplifier. So anyway, let's get to pouring, and then we'll wrap this up with how the pour turned out. Okay, so I'm getting these cans ready to do my pour, and first thing I did was I took some masking tape and taped off the whole outside of the can. It's probably a little overkill, but I figure if I drool a little epoxy down the side of it, it'll be much easier to just peel off the tape than it will be to, try to get it off of that finish that's already on these cans. The other thing, and I highly recommend you do this because there's the cut that I got on my thumb handling this thing. These edges here are crazy sharp. They're like punched out, and they have a lip on the back side of them. And especially on this top edge that you're going to be possibly handling, like this, moving the transformer around, get a Dremel tool and like round off the corners of this so you don't cut your finger like I did. That still hurts. So anyway, I did that on both of these edges to make sure that I don't cut my fingers anymore handling these things. And then I put 4 of these little thin 3M branded little rubber pads on each of the corners. And this is going to go down in the can, so it will just slightly space up what would be the top of this transformer from the top of the can, so that we don't have metal to metal touching. And then this is going to slide in like this, and then stand it up. And again, you can see how you have to touch these edges to kind of move this around. So you want to make sure those aren't sharp. And then, the wires are going to come through like that and like this. That's going to be the idea. And then we want to center this thing. You'll feel it bump. And then you go this way. And you feel it bump. And then you get it right in the middle, so it's not touching on either side. And again, with those not smoothed off, I would have just cut my thumb again. So that's kind of the plan, is to get both these cans set up like this, all ready to do my pour. And then I cut off this strip right here, and you see what a nice big opening it gives me to pour the epoxy in. And this epoxy that I'm using, which is this stuff here, is pretty thin out of the bottle. And it's designed for electronic grade epoxy. And I think it's going to flow down in here really good. I'm not going to have any issues with it, like not, being too thick and not pouring down into these crevices around and flowing up underneath the transformer on what will be the top. And I think this is going to go pretty smooth. There were warnings about mixing up too large a batch of this, that it can extremely hasten the cure time. And so I don't think I'm not sure if I'm going to maybe mix up 6 ounces to start with and just kind of see how that goes. I know a viewer said to be careful that they mixed up a large batch and it went into this exothermic reaction and just started smoking and going crazy, and like it was pretty scary. So obviously you don't want to mix up the whole quart of this, and also keep the heat from building up, and don't have some exothermic reaction from pouring too much epoxy in the can at once. And so, given this is my first time trying something like this, I want to be careful and make sure that I do it in a conservative way where I don't do something stupid and ruin parts. And I feel pretty confident that this is going to go just perfectly fine. I mean, this can't be rocket science doing this kind of thing. Okay, so we're ready to go do this thing, and I decided to go ahead and do this inside. I was worried about the outdoor humidity might cause some issues, and then my plan is that once I get the pour done and I can feel it's kind of settled, I can take them outside, or especially once it's skinned over, I can take them outside so it doesn't stink up the house. We'll see how smelly this stuff is. I may just even leave it inside to cure. So the main thing we want to do before we get started is make sure that these transformers are like centered in the can in this direction so that nothing's touching the side. And there's that one's good, and I've got the other can all ready to go too. And yeah, it's kind of, and that looks nice and centered up too. So I was gonna go get some rubber gloves, but I don't feel like driving to the store, and they gave these little finger condoms, whatever you want to call them, that should keep the epoxy off of my mixing hand. And I may be sorry that I'm doing this, but oh, let me go get a rag too. Handy. Here we go. Get my little cotton towels. I'll put a link in the description to these little cotton towels on Amazon. They're fairly cheap, and they're just so handy to have just a bunch of, nice, clean-ish rags around that are absorbent like those are. And you're not messing up nice towels. So I did come in and I got a Sharpie and I marked the 8 and the 12 because you can see it's really difficult unless you get the light just right. You can't see the numbers. And so we're going to mix up 12 ounces, which I hope isn't enough to cause anything crazy to happen. But I do know too that it says that mixing up a little bit larger batch will make it cure a little faster, which I want it to cure fairly quick and not be like 48 hours between pours. So here we go. And this stuff is a little thicker than I thought. Actually, this looks like a lot more than I initially thought. So maybe we'll do, I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to mark 4 and 6. And we'll do 6 ounces for the first pour. That sounds a little safer than trying to mix up 12. Maybe for the second pour, I'll mix up a little bigger batch. But for this first one, let's do 4 ounces with 2 ounces of hardener. And this hardener's much thinner than the epoxy itself is, so you need to be careful here and not end up with too much. There we go. That looks like a nice 2-to-1 ratio. Now, they said to stir this for 5 minutes. And so, gonna kind of move ahead here in the video. So we stirred a couple of minutes off camera. So one of the things you want to do is make sure you go around the sides with a stick and get any epoxy that was up on the sides back down into the pool and stir, stir, stir. Now, it did say in the instructions to let it sit for 5 minutes after you stir it up so that the bubbles can rise to the top. I'm not too concerned about the bubbles part of it. This isn't going to be something that is visible. And I don't think a few bubbles in the mix is going to have any detrimental impact to it. And I don't want to let it sit and something weird happens and it starts thickening up where it doesn't pour well. So maybe just like another minute of stirring. I'm trying to make sure I get down in the corners good. This little tub has nice rounded corners, and the stick has a real nice rounded kind of a deal on it. And yes, I'm mixing this up on a old political yard sign. This one happens to be for when I ran for city council. It's a Stiffy Kuntz yard sign, so there we go. But old yard signs make really good things like this for protecting a surface and doing something messy, or hopefully it's not messy. Hopefully we don't spill anything and we have a nice clean pour. And I feel like that this 6 ounces was actually a good amount to mix up. I think 12 would have been a little tough to get mixed thoroughly. And I know that I'm going to be able to mix up this amount very thoroughly. So I'm going to give it about another 45 seconds of mixing, and then we're going to pour this thing and see what happens. Like I said, keep working the sides to make sure that you don't have any material that sits up on the side and doesn't get the hardener mixed in with it. At first, when I started mixing it, there was a lot of hardener that was stuck up on the side. And if you kind of angle it when you're doing this, it forces it down into the pool of mixture. That's 5 minutes of stirring. I think we're ready to go. And I'm going to start over here on this side like this. I want to try to avoid doing what I did here and having it just sitting up on the top. Although I may just wipe that off with my towel so we don't have a little thin layer up here on the top, because that's probably not a good thing. And then let me turn it around and we'll pour it down this other side. And then we'll pour some down there. And I can see it leveling out down to the bottom. Scoop that down. Try to push that down into off the top here. Again, this is not something I've ever done before, so you're kind of watching me do this on the fly. And then I think I can kind of go like this and get the last of this out so we can mix up another batch. And there we go. There's our first pour. That went really smooth. Didn't end up making a mess. And this stuff really isn't very stinky. So this isn't something that I feel like you would have to take outside to do, because it's going to overwhelm, fumes in your house. And so I think I'm just going to go ahead and mix up another batch, let that cure, and then come back and do another pour in about 24 hours after this is cured. So I don't think I need to show you a repeat of this process on camera, and we'll wrap up this video here. Well, if I'm being honest, I have to say this was a little scary, because if this turned out wrong, or I really screwed this up, this is burning a ton of money. Like, a pair of these cans was $100. The epoxy was $45, and then these, or with tax, it was like $50, and then these transformers are $500 a pair. And so that's like $650 here on the line. And I'm pleased to say this turned out really well. I am glad I cut this little, bar out here on this bracket. So there's this little window here to be able to pour the epoxy through. The stuff's, it's not super thick, but it's not super thin either. So it was nice to have like a thing I could aim for to dump the epoxy through so it would go down and around the transformer. And I think I'm going to have enough epoxy to do both the transformers. Anyway, it is going to make it nice for my use for this on my 300B monoblock. I'm going to build one of them with tango iron, one with these, and that they're the same like mounting points and the same wire connection points and all that stuff. I can put one on 1 amp, put the ISO on one and the Thermionic Labs on the other, and be able to A/B listen to them because they're going to be identical other than the transformers. And then if I don't like one or the other, it's not like, oh my god, I can't. Yeah, you just unbolt it and bolt the other one on. And so that's going to work really well. And again, this isn't something I've got a lot of experience on. If you think I'm doing something wrong, you can leave a comment. It's kind of too late. Hopefully I'm doing this right. I don't think this is rocket science, but you just need to be careful too not to, it can get messy. And make sure that you mix this stuff up right. Years ago, I was doing a repair on a fiberglass boat. Ran over a log and it punched a hole in the bottom of the boat or cracked it, and I ground it all down and mixed up the fiberglass, and I didn't put enough hardener in it for the temperature, and it never cured. And it was just a mess trying to fix it because you got this kind of half cured fiberglass that you can't grind, but it won't just scrape off. And yeah, and this especially would be a nightmare if you poured that epoxy all down around this transformer in this can and it didn't cure. Or it cured too fast because you put too much hardener in it. So make sure that you're at least fairly accurate and mix it up really good. That's the key, is to make sure that, just spend the time, make sure it's super mixed up. I wasn't too concerned about, if there were some bubbles in the epoxy. Some people might, I guess theoretically, you could say, well, that's an air pocket. It's not going to transfer the heat. These things don't get that hot. If it was a power transformer, I might have been a little more like anal retentive about the bubbles in the epoxy. But yeah, we're not going to sweat that. And then on the final pour, I just want to make sure I got these wires in the right place so that they can be brought across and then soldered onto this. And there is plenty of room. Yeah, this is going to work out perfect. And it's almost like this can was made to put this size transformer in it. So, there we go. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters and folks that make donations on my website. Anyway, we're going to come back in the next video, do the second pour, then I'm going to show you how to wire up the little turret thing on the bottom and show you what the finished thing looks like. And maybe by then I'm going to get some little skunky badge plates to put on the top of these, because I'm not going to put Tango or ISO labels on them because that's not what they are. But it'll be fun to have those little skunky things that'll fit in these in case the customer says, hey, that would look cool. Or maybe give them the option. Do you want the ISO badge or you want the skunky badge to put on your transformer? So gonna get a bunch, or not a bunch, but get at least a dozen of those made up. So anyway, till the next video, have a nice day.